Let me be perfectly clear, mediocrity has no place in this hospital. Dr. Richard Blackwood's voice echoed through the staff cafeteria. His words sharp enough to draw blood. His 4000 suit didn't have a single wrinkle. His silver hair was styled to television-perfect precision, and his contempt was directed at one person. Sarah Mitchell, 34, single mother of one, night shift nurse, standing by the coffee machine with a stained scrub top and exhaustion carved into every line of her face. When I see nurses showing up late, looking like they slept in their cars, unable to keep up with basic patient care standards, he gestured directly at Sarah, making sure everyone in that crowded room understood exactly who he meant. It reflects poorly on this entire institution. Sarah's hands tightened around her coffee cup, the cheap ceramic so hot it burned, but she didn't move, didn't defend herself. Just stood there taking the public humiliation like she'd taken worse things before. What Dr. Richard Blackwood didn't know, what none of the 47 staff members watching this performance knew, was that Sarah Mitchell had a Purple Heart medal locked in her employee locker, 3 rows down from where they stood. She'd earned it in Kandahar province, Afghanistan, during 14 minutes that turned her from a 24-year-old army medic into someone who saved 17 soldiers' lives while bleeding from shrapnel wounds in her left leg. Have you ever watched someone powerful destroy someone powerless, not knowing they were humiliating a hero? St. Catherine's Hospital in Philadelphia served 2,400 patients daily, a sprawling complex of glass and steel where life and death decisions happened in fluorescent-lit hallways. Dr. Richard Blackwood had been director for 3 years, brought in from Johns Hopkins to elevate standards and optimize operational efficiency, corporate speak for cutting costs and pushing staff to breaking points. He was a surgeon by training, brilliant with a scalpel, terrible with people. His management style combined intimidation with public shaming, a strategy that kept nurses walking on eggshells and doctors competing for his approval like children, desperate for a distant father's attention. Sarah Mitchell had been working at St. Catherine's for 8 months, ever since moving to Philadelphia from Virginia with her 8-year-old daughter Emma. Single mother. The father had left before Emma was born, disappeared like smoke, leaving Sarah to figure out parenting alone. Before nursing school, before Emma, before everything. Sarah had been Army Specialist Sarah Rodriguez, combat medic assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, deployed to Afghanistan for 2 tours that aged her a decade in 3 years. She joined at 19 looking for purpose, college money, something bigger than herself. She'd found it in the dust and blood of forward operating base Shank, where mortar attacks were routine and casualties were measured in shattered bodies and trauma that never quite healed. Her second tour ended on May 17, 2014. The IED hit their convoy at 600 hours, turning 2 Humvees into twisted metal and fire. Sarah remembered the sound, not the explosion itself, but the silence that came after. The horrible quiet before her ears started working again, and the screaming started. She'd been thrown clear, her left leg torn open by shrapnel, blood soaking through her uniform. Protocol said wait for medevac. Training said assess your own injuries first. But 6 soldiers were trapped in burning vehicles, and Sarah could hear them dying. She'd crawled back into hell, pulled out Corporal James Washington, 22, who'd lost his right arm, dragged Private First Class Maria Gonzalez, 20, from under debris while bullets from insurgents peppered the sand around them, went back again, and again, and again. 14 minutes. 6 trips. 17 soldiers saved. The combat camera footage later reviewed by commanders showed her moving like something mechanical. Something beyond pain, beyond fear. Just purpose and motion, and refusal to let anyone else die. The shrapnel in her leg that she'd ignored turned septic. She nearly lost the leg itself. 3 surgeries, 8 weeks of recovery. A Purple Heart ceremony she barely remembered, through the haze of pain medications and PTSD that announced itself in nightmares and hypervigilance that never quite went away. She'd been honorably discharged, sent back to civilian life with a medal, a limp that flared up when she was tired, and skills that didn't translate to job applications. What was she supposed to put on a resume? Proficient in trauma care under enemy fire. Excellent at not dying. She'd used her GI Bill to get through nursing school, working night shifts at a 24-hour diner to pay for childcare while studying anatomy and pharmacology, and trying to be present for Emma's school plays and parent-teacher conferences. She'd chosen pediatrics initially, thinking she'd be good with kids, but the residual hypervigilance made the chaos of a children's ward overwhelming. So she'd switched to night shift general care at St. Catherine's. Fewer people, quieter hallways, space to breathe. The pay was $47,000 annually, barely enough to cover rent on their 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots at night were common enough that Emma had learned to sleep through them. Sarah worked doubles when she could, picked up extra shifts, survived on 4 hours of sleep and coffee that tasted like hot despair. She was always exhausted, always behind on bills, always one emergency away from catastrophe. And she never, ever talked about Afghanistan. Not to coworkers, not to Emma, not to anyone. The medal stayed locked in her locker because she didn't need recognition or gratitude. She just needed to survive. Dr. Blackwood had been targeting her for weeks. It started small comments about her appearance, suggestions that she try harder to look professional, implications that single mothers were naturally less committed to their careers. Last week, he'd written her up for being 7 minutes late, even though she'd texted her supervisor that Emma's school had called about a fever, and she'd had to arrange emergency childcare. "Excuses are not acceptable," he'd said, his pen signing the disciplinary action like he was pronouncing sentence. "Healthcare is a 24/7 commitment. If you can't handle that, perhaps you should consider a different field." Now, standing in the cafeteria with 47 witnesses, Dr. Blackwood continued his performance. "Standards exist for a reason. When I see nurses who clearly don't take their responsibilities seriously, who show up looking like," he made a vague gesture at Sarah's wrinkled scrubs, the coffee stain from an earlier spill, the exhaustion she couldn't hide, like this, "it tells me we have a cultural problem that needs addressing." Sarah's colleague, Maria Chen, a fellow nurse who'd become something like a friend, took a half-step forward like she might defend Sarah. Sarah caught her eye and shook her head slightly. "Don't. It's not worth it." "Effective immediately," Dr. Blackwood announced, "I'm implementing a new evaluation system. Any staff member who receives more than 2 disciplinary actions in a 3-month period will be placed on probationary status with potential termination." His eyes locked on Sarah. "Some people need clearer incentives to meet our standards." Sarah set down her coffee cup with mechanical precision. She could feel everyone watching, some sympathetic, some grateful it wasn't them, some probably agreeing with Dr. Blackwood that she didn't belong here. She walked past him without a word, her left leg aching, the old wound where shrapnel had torn through muscle sending jolts of pain up to her hip. She'd been standing for 11 hours already, had another 5 to go, and she still had to check on Mr. Patterson in 304, who was recovering from cardiac surgery, and Mrs. Liu in 217, whose pain medication needed adjusting. She didn't have time for this. She didn't have energy for this. She just had to survive until morning. But something, doctor. Blackwood said the next day, pushed past her defenses. Sarah was changing eye bags in room 412 when she overheard him talking to a visiting hospital administrator in the hallway. His voice carried, probably intentionally. "The problem with hiring veterans," Dr. Blackwood said, "is they bring all their trauma baggage with them. They're damaged goods. Mitchell, for example," I looked at her file. "Army medic, medical discharge. I'm sure she saw some difficult things, but that doesn't excuse present incompetence." Sarah's hands froze on the IV line. The patient, Mrs. Williams, 67, noticed. "Honey, are you okay?" Sarah forced her hands to keep moving, to finish the task. "I'm fine, Mrs. Williams. But she wasn't fine, Mrs. Williams. But she wasn't fine." The words "damaged goods" echoed in her head, mixing with older voices, meaner ones. The ones that came during 3:00 a.m. panic attacks when Emma was asleep, and Sarah's brain decided to replay every moment she'd failed to save someone. Every face that still haunted her. Every reason she might not be good enough. After her shift, Sarah sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, just breathing, trying to hold herself together. Her phone buzzed Emma's school. "Ms. Mitchell, Emma hasn't been feeling well. Can you pick her up early? She had to be back at work in 9 hours. She needed to sleep. But Emma needed her more." "I'll be right there," Sarah said, and drove through exhaustion to collect her daughter, who had a low fever and wanted her mother. They stopped at a pharmacy for children's Tylenol that Sarah couldn't quite afford but bought anyway. At home, Sarah made Emma soup from a can, helped with homework she could barely focus on, and tucked her daughter into bed at 8:00 p.m. with a kiss and a promise. "I'll always be here when you need me." Then she set her alarm for 2:00 a.m. so she could be back at the hospital by 3:00 for another night shift. At the hospital that night, Dr. Blackwood had left a note on her locker. Second disciplinary action. Inadequate patient charting, room 412, date yesterday. One more and you're on probation. Shape up or ship out. Sarah stared at the note. The charting had been complete. She'd double-checked it herself. This was fabricated. A power play. A man with authority deciding someone beneath him didn't deserve their job. She could fight it. File a complaint with HR. Get a union representative involved. But that would take time, energy, money for legal fees she didn't have. And meanwhile, Emma needed food and rent was due. And there were no other nursing jobs in Philadelphia that didn't require experience she couldn't prove or references from supervisors who weren't actively trying to destroy her. So Sarah crumpled the note, threw it away, and went to check on her patients. Mrs. Williams was awake, unable to sleep, worried about her upcoming surgery. Sarah sat with her for 15 minutes, time she didn't have. Time she'd pay for later when charting ran behind, and held the older woman's hand while talking about nothing important. Grandchildren, gardening, the weather. "You're kind," Mrs. Williams said. "That's rare." "Just doing my job," Sarah replied. "No," Mrs. Williams said firmly. "Kindness is never just a job." At 4:37 a.m. the emergency started. Code blue. Room 289. Sarah ran, her bad leg screaming protests, her body moving on autopilot trained by years of emergency response. The patient, a 52-year-old man recovering from gallbladder surgery, had gone into cardiac arrest. The night shift team converged. Sarah, 2 other nurses, the on-call resident who looked barely old enough to vote. Chaos. Controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. The resident was panicking, his hands shaking as he tried to intubate. The patient's oxygen saturation dropped. 87, 82, 78. The monitors screamed warnings. Sarah's training clicked in, not her nursing training, but older instincts. Muscle memory from forward operating base shank, where seconds meant life or death. "Move," she said to the resident. Not harsh, just certain. Her hands took over. She intubated in one smooth motion, the kind of procedure that took practice and steadiness under pressure. The patient's oxygen started climbing. 81, 85, 92. She called for medications in rapid succession, her voice calm, her movements precise. The other nurses followed her lead without question. 6 minutes of controlled crisis. Then the patient stabilized. Heart rhythm normalized. Oxygen at 97. The room exhaled collectively. The resident stared at Sarah like he'd just witnessed a magic trick. Where did you learn doesn't matter," Sarah said, already checking vitals, already moving to the next task. But someone else had been watching. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, the hospital's chief of surgery, had been passing by when the code blue sounded. She'd stood in the doorway, observing, seeing something the rest of the staff had missed. Precision that came from experience beyond civilian healthcare. Confidence that came from surviving worse emergencies. Leadership that came from making life or death decisions in conditions where hesitation meant casualties. After the emergency, Dr. Okonkwo pulled Sarah aside. "That was exceptional work, Nurse Mitchell." Sarah nodded, exhausted, wanting only to finish charting and go home. "Just doing my job, Dr. Okonkwo." "I've read your file," Dr. Okonkwo continued. "Your Army, combat medic, Afghanistan, 2 tours, Purple Heart recipient." Sarah went still. "My file shouldn't have that information. That's private. Dr. Blackwood accessed it, Dr." Okonkwo said bluntly. "He's been building a case to terminate you, and he wanted ammunition. He flagged your military service as a potential liability, PTSD. Unreliability, the usual discriminatory nonsense people use against veterans." Sarah's hands clenched. "So what now? He's the director. He can fire me for any reason." "Actually," Dr. Okonkwo said, "he can't. I'm chief of surgery. I outrank him in medical decisions. And I have been watching his management style for months. He's a liability to this hospital. High turnover, low morale, multiple potential lawsuits from staff he's harassed." She paused. "I need your permission to do something." "Do what?" "The hospital board meets tomorrow. I want to present your case not as a complaint, but as evidence of Dr. Blackwood's failure to recognize and utilize the exceptional talent on our staff. I want to show them what happened tonight. And I want your permission to reveal your military service, your medal, your record." Sarah felt exposed, vulnerable. "I don't want to be someone's inspirational story." "You're not," Dr. Okonkwo said. "You're a nurse who saved a life tonight because of skills you earned through service and sacrifice. And you're being targeted by a man who sees veterans as damaged rather than decorated. The board needs to know both things." Sarah thought about Emma, about rent, about being too tired to fight. Then she thought about the 17 soldiers she'd pulled from fire in Kandahar, about how she'd refused to let anyone die that day, about how surrender had never been in her nature. "Okay," she said, "but I want to be there." The board meeting happened at 3:00 p.m. the next day. Sarah hadn't slept. She'd worked until 7:00 a.m., taken Emma to school, then driven back to the hospital, still wearing yesterday's scrubs, because she didn't have time to go home and change. The boardroom was intimidating. 12 board members, including the hospital CEO, all in expensive suits, all looking at her like she was a specimen under glass. Blackwood sat at the far end of the table, his expression smug. He thought he was there to witness Sarah's termination. Dr. Okonkwo stood. "I've called this meeting to address a personnel matter that reflects on our hospital's values, and leadership. 3 nights ago, Dr. Blackwood publicly berated Nurse Sarah Mitchell, calling her mediocre and suggesting her military service made her damaged goods. Dr. Blackwood's smugness flickered. "That's taken out of context. There were 47 witnesses," Dr. Okonkwo said coldly. "I have written statements from 6 of them. But let's talk about what happened last night." She played the security camera footage from the Code Blue. No sound, just video. Sarah running into the room, taking over from the panicking resident, intubating the patient, leading the team with absolute confidence. 6 minutes of life-saving medical intervention. That patient is alive because of Nurse Mitchell's exceptional skill under pressure, Dr. Okonkwo continued. Skills she earned as an Army combat medic. Specialist Sarah Rodriguez, that was her name, then served 2 tours in Afghanistan. On May 17, 2014, her convoy was attacked. Despite being wounded herself, she saved 17 soldiers' lives. Dr. Okonkwo pulled out a folder. "I have her military records here, declassified with her permission. Purple Heart, Bronze Star for Valor, commendations from her commanding officers." One report reads, "Specialist Rodriguez displayed courage and medical skill under fire that exceeded all expectations. She is a credit to her unit and to the United States Army." The board members were leaning forward now, their expressions shifting from board bureaucrats to people confronting something unexpected. Dr. Okonkwo turned to Dr. Blackwood. "You called her damaged goods. You systematically harassed her, wrote her up for fabricated infractions, and attempted to terminate a decorated veteran who saves lives, literally saves lives, in this hospital every night she works." She pulled out another document. "This is a formal complaint citing hostile work environment, discrimination against veterans in violation of federal law, and gross mismanagement. It's signed by 23 staff members who've witnessed Dr. Blackwood's behavior." The CEO, Margaret Hartman, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, looked at Sarah directly. "Nurse Mitchell, is all of this true?" Sarah stood. Her left leg ached from 36 hours without sleep. Her scrubs still had a coffee stain from yesterday, but she'd faced worse than boardrooms. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "Everything Dr. Okonkwo said is accurate. Dr. Blackwood has been targeting me since I started here. I didn't report it because I'm a single mother and I need this job. And I know how power works." "Show them," Dr. Okonkwo said gently. Sarah pulled a small box from her bag. Inside, on faded purple velvet, was her Purple Heart medal. She placed it on the polished boardroom table. The room went silent. Dr. Blackwood's face had gone pale. Margaret Hartman picked up the medal with careful reverence, turning it over, reading the inscription. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Dr. Blackwood, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out." "You can't?" "I'm the director." "You were the director," Margaret said. "You created a hostile work environment, violated federal protections for veterans, and failed to recognize exceptional talent. Those are fireable offenses. You have 1 hour to clear your office." She turned to Sarah. "Nurse Mitchell, on behalf of this hospital and this board, I apologize. We failed you. That changes today." 3 months later, Sarah Mitchell was named Director of Emergency Nursing, a position created specifically to utilize her trauma care expertise. Her salary increased to $89,000. She moved Emma into a better apartment, in a better neighborhood, with better schools. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo became the new hospital director, implementing policies that protected staff from harassment and actively recruited veterans. St. Catherine's launched a Veterans Preference Hiring Program, with Sarah leading training on how military medical experience translated to civilian healthcare. On the first anniversary of her promotion, Sarah gave a talk at a nursing school. Students filled the auditorium, eager to learn from the woman whose story had gone viral, the single mom nurse who'd been called mediocre by a man who never bothered to see the hero standing in front of him. "I didn't share my military service because I wanted recognition," Sarah told them. "I shared it because someone powerful tried to make me feel small, and I refused to stay small. You will all face moments where someone with authority tells you you're not good enough. Remember this: medals don't make you valuable. Your skills, your compassion, your refusal to give up, that makes you valuable." After the talk, a young woman approached, nervous. "I'm a veteran too. Iraq. I've been afraid to put it on applications because I thought people would see me as broken." Sarah smiled. "You're not broken. You're trained. There's a difference, and the right people will see that." That night, Sarah went home to Emma, now 9, who was doing homework at their kitchen table in an apartment with windows that looked out over a park instead of an alley. Emma looked up. "Mom, I wrote about you for my school essay, about how you're a hero." Sarah knelt beside her daughter, pulled her close. "You know what makes someone a hero, Emma? It's not medals or what happened a long time ago. It's showing up every day. Even when you're tired, even when people are mean, even when it's hard. That's what heroes do, like you," Emma said. "Like both of us," Sarah replied. "Sometimes the person you underestimate is the one you should be honoring. Sometimes mediocrity is just excellence that no one bothered to notice. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who survived the loudest wars and came out stronger for it. If this story reminded you that heroes walk among us, that veterans deserve respect, not pity, and that the person you dismiss might be exactly the person you need, hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their past doesn't limit their future, it prepares them for it. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated and prove them wrong. Your story matters. Your service matters. You matter. Always.